Yes, ma'am. See you. The committee will come to order. Good morning and Happy New Year to everybody. The committee has not formally organized, so we have to start off by asking for unanimous consent to conduct today's hearing under the rules of the committee under the 113th Congress, and without objection, so ordered. Hopefully our colleagues, Mr. DeFazio and others, will, in the next week or so, you'll be ready to come together.
Yes, we're organizing today.
Okay, great. And I know we have some new members on the committee, and you know what? I need a list of our members because we got quite a few. I see many of them here today. I don't know if you have your...
We have one new member here today. That would be it. Do you want me to introduce
Yeah,
her?
please.
Okay. Well, Jared's not here. I know, but he's not here, so we aren't going to recognize him. Those who show up get rewarded, and those who don't. Mr. Chairman, we have actually two new members at the insistence of Mr. Nolan. Jared Huffman, who's not here, so I won't wax eloquent about him, but I serve with him on the Resources Committee, and he's very solid and will be a great contributor to the committee. And Julia Brownlee, who represents the smaller port of Southern California, but yet a very important area. It represents Ventura and that area around there, and was also formerly in the State Assembly for, was it 6 years? And so we're looking forward to her contribution, and a major focus for her will be intermodal and port activities.
Well, thank you and welcome to the committee. Also, I'll introduce our new members to the committee, starting with a gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Rouser, who's been on Capitol Hill before, so he's seen a couple of tour duties here and other jobs on the Hill, other capacities, so we'd like to welcome him. Ms. Walters is not here today. She is from Southern California. Ms. Comstock, Barbara Comstock's from Northern Virginia. Mr. Corbello, and I know his first name, but go on, you freshman, what's his first name? Carlos, yes, I knew it began with a C, but Carlos Corbello from the Miami area. Our most senior new member is Mr. Woodall, Rob Woodall from Georgia, suburbs of Atlanta and the hinterlands of Georgia, where they've got some water issues. Mr. Rakita from Indiana. Mr. Katko from New York, upstate New York, I believe Syracuse area. Mr. Babin, Brian Babin, I'm sorry. Doc's easier. From Texas. What part of Texas exactly? Woodville, Texas. Okay. Crescent Hardy, who's from the entire state, I think, of Nevada, or 80% of it. That's correct, isn't it, Mr. Hardy? Yeah. Who's next to you? I can't see the name. Oh, I should know that, Ryan Costello. He's from the Philadelphia Eagles part of the fan base of Pennsylvania. I'm from the Pittsburgh side, so hopefully we can come together on the committee here. Mr. Garrett Graves from Louisiana. What part of Louisiana? Baton Rouge, that's what I thought. And I believe that's it. So we got a big new lineup here. Looking forward to working with all of you. And today, again, I want to welcome our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Connor, Mr. How do you pronounce it? Heichman? Did I get it right? Hilkman. Okay, I see the L there. I don't have my glasses on, so. Again, welcome today. Glad you're here with us today. And today's hearing is on FAA reauthorization, reforming and streamlining the FAA's regulatory certification process, which I know you two have a lot to say about that. The current FAA authorization is set to expire at the end of September, and passing a new bill that helps lay the groundwork for the future of U.S. aviation is a top priority for this committee. I look forward to hearing about the progress the FAA has made to streamline the certification process since the last FAA bill was signed into law, as well as areas that witnesses believe are in need of additional reform. I think everyone here today understands the important role that aviation plays in our nation's economy. Aviation manufacturing is at the heart of American leadership in aviation and high technology. This vital industry contributes billions of dollars and supports millions of jobs in our country's economy and is our leading export sector. Today we are discussing FAA regulatory certification processes which have significant impacts on our nation's ability to innovate, manufacture, export, operate, and maintain the very safest products in an increasingly competitive global market. The FAA is responsible for ensuring every aircraft in our skies is safe and that those that maintain and fly those aircraft are well qualified and well trained. Besides ensuring the safety of aircraft, our certification system must be efficient, rational, and must be applied in a consistent, fair, and transparent manner. Too often we are seeing unnecessary regulatory burdens that do not serve to improve actual aircraft safety. It seems to be a process simply for the sake of process. Or we are seeing inconsistent interpretations of applications for a number of FAA policies and regulations. In fact, I've heard cases where from region to region it's different, from office to office it's different, and with even in offices, inspectors see things in a different way. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen. Products and technology that can actually enhance aircraft safety are often caught in a bureaucratic maze, substantially delaying their implementation and the realization of safety benefits. I've heard concerns that our certification processes are much slower than those in other countries, resulting in American companies being placed at a disadvantage to their foreign competitors who have a more streamlined process to get their products certified in the market. While U.S. commercial aviation is the safest in the world, we must also ensure that our safety regulations and the processes they go through are effective, consistent, and keep pace with the modern marketplace. The FAA is the gold standard for aviation safety. It is a big part of what makes this country the global leader in aviation. We cannot let American leadership slip away or squandered away because of regulatory processes that are overly burdensome, unnecessarily cumbersome, inconsistently applied, and out of sync with a changing world. As aviation stakeholders innovate and seek to compete in a fast-paced marketplace, it is important that the FAA's standards keep pace. Instead of being the unquestioned global leader in bringing innovative products to market, the United States sometimes lags behind the rest of the world in the introduction of new technology. Given the concerns we have heard about the FAA's certification processes, we are looking to our witnesses to hear if there are additional reforms and streamlining efforts needed in the next FAA reauthorization, and to ensure that our certification processes guarantee the safety of our system while not inhibiting aviation growth. And with that, I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. DeFazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to be here today and begin the focus of this committee for FAA reauthorization on the certification process. 28 years on this committee, and I've seen a lot of changes. One, I'd just like to recall, because it points to the balance in the certification process, and that is when I was early on the committee, I always thought that the old rules, basically going back to the CAB days where the FAA was charged with both promoting and regulating the industry in the interests of public safety, were in conflict, and I was assured time and time again they weren't. In fact, in the 1996 FAA reauthorization, my amendment to strip them of the promotional authority was defeated. A little later that year, ValueJet went down. And we found that because this was essentially a lack of oversight and accountability with a contractor to a subcontractor, that people had died. And oddly enough, in those days we followed the rules, but somehow they found, even though my amendment had been defeated and was in neither the Senate nor the House bill, I got a call saying, where can we put it in the bill? And we put it in the bill, and we stripped virtually all of the promotional, rules and regulations pertaining to the FAA from the bill to make it clear that they are an agency that regulates in the interests of the public and public safety. And that brings us here today. Certification. It's critical. We have been, as the chairman said, and should and hope to continue to be the gold standard in terms of safety in the industry. We have been the world leader in terms of innovation. And we need to balance these things as well and as best as we can. I have very little patience for repetitive work, bureaucracy. We need a system that's risk-based. It sets proper prioritization, but it has to also be robust and faultless. And I don't think we're quite at that point on either side. I'm going to ask unanimous consent to put in the record, and I would actually recommend it to members because of the testimony. I read all of it today. It's the most meaningful. It's from PASS, and they talk about problems with staffing. We can't pretend that we don't need to oversee the process even when we delegate, but more and more that's becoming the virtual reality. On the other hand, we can certainly do better on the agency level in terms of not going through repetitive processes. Again, just ancient history, and I'm sure this doesn't go on anymore. But many years ago, I was visiting a manufacturer who made the film that goes inside the hull, essentially the wallpaper in the airplane, and they had passed flammability standards. And I said, that's great. And they said, yeah, but, we have to do it for every type. I said, what do you mean for every type? And they said, well, like 737-200, 737-300, 737-400. I said, it's all the same hull. It's all the same interior. It's all the same flammability standard. They said, yeah, no, but that's not the way the FAA does it. I hope that doesn't go on today. That's nonsensical. We need to focus on new technologies. We need to focus on things that aren't repetitive, things that are risk-based, that promote real, potential threats to the integrity and the airworthiness of our aircraft. I also noted in the testimony, and I'll get into it with GAO, that I believe that there are some barriers being artificially created by our friends in the EU and elsewhere, where they use their processes to disadvantage American manufacturers and advantage their own, or in the case of the Chinese, where they basically ask you to give them every single technical detail and proprietary bit of information on how something was produced, but don't worry, they won't copy it before they'll certify it. And I don't believe that the FAA has pushed back hard enough against some of these other foreign civil aviation authorities in the EU and elsewhere to give us a level playing field, and that's something else that warrants examining. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. DeFazio. And with that, I want to introduce our two witnesses today, Mr. Ray Conner, who's the President and CEO of Boeing Commercial Airplanes, the Boeing Company, and Mr. Aaron Hilkeman, I got it right that time, who's the President and CEO of Duncan Aviation. With that, Mr. Conner, why don't you go ahead and start off with your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Schuster. Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to provide Boeing's perspective as you begin the process of developing legislation to reauthorize the Federal Aviation Administration. I'm Ray Conner, President Chief Executive Officer of the Boeing Commercial Airplanes. It's an honor to be here to represent 80,000 Boeing commercial airplane employees and the world's largest commercial airplane manufacturer. Mr. Chairman, I have longer remarks that, with your permission, I would like to submit for the record. My remarks this morning focus on the FAA's ongoing effort with the support of Congress to modernize the airplane certification process. They also address the importance of continuing this effort to both aviation safety and American aerospace competitiveness. Before I address that important topic, I want to make a couple general observations about the industry's shared commitment to safety. Any discussion of U.S. aviation regulation should begin with this very important fact. Travel on a large commercial jet is the safest form of transportation in human history. More than 8 million people board airplanes daily and arrive safely at their destinations. While there have been some high-profile air tragedies of late, most all these airplanes arrive with safe, and the magnitude of the safety is far better than it's ever been in the history of our aviation history. In the USA today, a fatal accident occurs less than 1 out of every 45 million flights. This is an extraordinary safety record. It is a great accomplishment for the aviation industry and its regulators. And we have a shared commitment, one that is deeply embedded in the culture of our company, to continue to improve. The FAA's regulatory system and oversight efforts have, of course, been critical pillars of modern aviation's extraordinary safety record. The FAA certifies all Boeing's airplane designs, our production system, and each airplane that comes off our production lines in Washington State and South Carolina. The FAA's regulatory approach has necessarily adapted over time in an effort to ensure that its resources are deployed where they can most effectively contribute to safety in a rapidly growing and technologically complex industry. The FAA will need to draw upon this tradition of robust and efficient risk-based oversight in the decades ahead as air travel continues to grow. The last 5 years have been a great example of how Boeing and our industry are expanding. Since 2010, we've increased our production in our factories by 56% to meet the strong demand for our products. In 2014, we delivered 723 airplanes to our customers, and we've announced further rate increases in our production. And we expect growth in our industry will continue due to rising demand here and abroad. To stay ahead of the competition, Boeing will bring several new products to market in the next few years. They include the 787-10, the 737 MAX family, and the 777X. Each of these new airplanes will further improve fuel efficiency and provide other benefits to our customers and the flying public. The introduction of each airplane will also improve aviation safety as newer and safer airplanes with enhanced safety technology that replace older airplanes in the fleet. Of course, each airplane will have to be certified by the FAA, and the large volume of this work poses a significant challenge for the agency. To meet the challenge, the FAA will need to continue its work to modernize certification process. This will ensure it's making optimal risk-based decisions to deploy its resources in a way that maximizes safety benefit and that simultaneously enables industry to efficiently introduce new, safe, and compliant products. One of the important tools that the FAA has at its disposal is Organization Designation Authorization, or ODA. My written statement includes detailed information about ODA. The point I want to stress here is that ODA has served the FAA, our industry, and most importantly, the flying public very well. Mr. Chairman, it was gratifying to see the committee recognize the value and the importance of ODA in Section 312 in the last FAA Reauthorization Bill. As you know, this provision directed the FAA to consult with industry to determine ways to enhance the effective use of delegation and to consider process reforms and improvements to the certification process. The FAA has made progress since the last reauthorization, and I'm grateful for the agency's leadership in driving those improvements. As I mentioned in my written testimony, there are 3 areas where Congress could continue to support these efforts: accelerating the full use of ODA authority, developing training of the FAA workforce, and increasing international harmonization and certification standards. Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate the committee's support of the FAA's efforts to modernize the certification activities, and with the leadership of Administrator Huerta and the members of Congress, I'm confident that together we'll tackle the challenges I've described, and I want to just take the opportunity to thank everyone for allowing me to be here today, and I'm glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Connor. And with that, I'll turn to Mr. Hilkeman. Will you go ahead and proceed with your testimony?
Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, Aviation Subcommittee Ranking Member Larson is the Ranking Member, Aviation Subcommittee Chairman Lobiando. Distinguished members of the committee, I would like to just talk a little bit about Duncan Aviation. We are a family-owned business. We began in 1956. We are based in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Can you pull your mic closer to you?
Sure. We have over 2,000 employees, including over 500 veterans. We have 3 major facilities: Lincoln, Nebraska, Battle Creek, Michigan, and Provo, Utah. And we have 18 satellite facilities around the country. Approximately 25% of our business is from the international foreign registered aircraft. I'm currently Vice Chairman of the General Aviation Manufacturers Association's Board of Directors, and I also chair our Airworthiness and Maintenance Policy Committee. I want to begin by commending the FAA for selecting, conducting, and coordinating the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, ARC. This panel was established under the FAA Modernization and Reform Act of 2012. The ARC developed 6 recommendations that Duncan Aviation supports. I would like to highlight 2, which I believe are key to assist both the FAA and industry. The primary recommendation of the ARC was to establish a master electronic database for the agency and the industry use. By including internal directives, policy memos, legal interpretations, the FAA and industry could consistently interpret regulations. The second key recommendation of the ARC that I believe is significant is the establishment of the RCCB, the Regulatory Consistency Communication Board. This would enable the FAA and industry to have an arbiter to settle differing interpretations of the rules, both within each party and between the parties. These two initiatives could significantly impact issues that Duncan Aviation and others in our industry encounter. These issues currently involve inconsistent interpretation and application of the regulation and a lack of effective communication and dialogue during dispute resolution. Duncan has encountered these issues for our mobile maintenance units in the past 2.5 years. It was a process that directly impacted our ability to open additional units on a timely basis, while also costing time and resources to resolve. Establishing the RCCB could have resolved this issue in a much more timely fashion. I want to point out that the FAA has recognized the need for more guidance on mobile maintenance units and is drafting additional guidance at this time. Other improvements in oversight, including reducing redundant audits and moving to a more centralized risk-based approach to safety. The FAA is in agreement and recently issued a paper to ICAO. The upcoming FAA reauthorization offers the FAA, policymakers, and industry the opportunity to work together to promote safety and do so in an effective and efficient manner. Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, Aviation Subcommittee Chairman Lobiando, and Aviation Subcommittee Ranking Member Larson, on behalf of Duncan Aviation, I want to thank you for your leadership and the opportunity to provide this perspective. I would be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hilkeman. And I'll begin the questioning. Again, it's my concern, and if anybody's been in a room with me over the last 2 years or heard me say this over and over, I'm very concerned that if we don't do something in this reauthorization to streamline, to make this process work for us, we will lose leadership in the world, whether it's manufacturing, aircraft, parts, technology, or the airline industry. And I think we're already, we're under attack from our opponents out there in the industry. The Chinese have said they want to build a commercial aircraft here in the next decade or so. So I think now's the time to really move forward. Mr. Connor, you mentioned the ODA. Can you talk a little bit more in depth? I know it's in your testimony, but can you talk a little bit more about that and why you believe and what's going on and what you see things we can do to change it?
Yeah, well, delegation has been around for quite some time, as you know, and we've been authorized at full delegation authority, and what we're trying to do now is just to continue to use it to the largest extent possible. I think for the most part, we've been made great strides in that respect. We have a tremendous amount of people that are qualified now by the FAA to do this. We are making strides, but still there are places where we should be moving to more of the risk-based systems type approach to these kinds of things, where we're focusing our efforts on those areas of true safety concern and technology improvements, where the FAA can use those resources and those talents to be able to do that. A little bit too often, we're probably spending more time on areas where we could be the ones that are doing that kind of work.
And for some of our newer members here, can you explain exactly who works for you and how you train them in the FAA certified?
Yeah, we have an organization that's a delegated organization that really are, in essence, the arm of the FAA within the Boeing company. They
work for you.
They work for us.
But they're certified and they're
certified,
responsible for the FAA.
They're certified and they are approved by the FAA to basically take on that effort. And they take that job very, very seriously. And so we have a large organization that does that already today on areas that are maybe of lesser safety issues and interiors and those kinds of things, that we spend a lot of time with that. What we would like to do is move more to the risk-based systems approach, where systems engineering is really the larger piece of this, where the FAA spends their time, where we can then spend our time with our resources that are highly technically capable and are approved by the FAA. Each individual is approved by the FAA to do that kind of work.
And you pay those folks? It's on your dime, you're training them?
It's completely under the Boeing company's responsibility in terms of pay and those kinds of things. But they are viewed as, and essentially within our company, as an arm of the FAA.
Right. Thank you. And Mr. Hilkeman, can you talk some about the inconsistencies that you've seen out there, actual cases that and help to highlight what we're talking about here, because I travel around the country, I hear a lot of different, so if you could give us some concrete examples, would be very helpful.
You know, on the mobile repair station unit, we had been, there's a couple different ways of compliance.
And a mobile repair station is something that goes out to the airplane and actually fixes it, rebuilds it.
Exactly. They may have a truck or a van that they use to take the equipment out to. We had approximately 20 of those in place that we had been authorized as a workaway for probably a 10 or 15-year period. There was a change. They requested us to make a change to that. We wanted to discuss it. We asked for an extension, and normally you have 10 days to respond. We asked for an extension. The net of the story is we ultimately put in the applications at their request. About 6 months later, we did start to receive letters of fines for operating in the interim period under that old way. Ultimately, it has been resolved, and today, after 2.5 years of a process, we are putting the applications back in to change them back to the original process. So there was clearly a indecision on what the correct manner. Neither changed what we were doing. It was really simply a matter of how they would be, under what compliance we were under and what rule.
So after 2.5 years, you're virtually doing the same thing as you were doing before.
Right.
And that's why the RCCB is that in place now?
No, it is not in place now. But I do think, I feel strongly if that would have been in place and we could have brought that to that committee, it could have been resolved. I think what happens, and I understand the process, once it becomes a legal matter, then it eliminates our ability to have further discussions, whether it's in Washington or in the region. It makes it a difficult process to get resolved.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Yield to Mr. DeFazio for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Connor, you referred to international harmonization. I'd probably kind of like to have you expand on that, although I know there are oftentimes sensitivities since you do have to deal with some of these foreign entities on an ongoing basis. But, the FAA is, say they're working with the European agency on a so-called mutual acceptance model. Do you have any thoughts on that, whether, what sort of a priority that should be, what sorts of problems that could solve?
Yes, thank you. I think from a standpoint of harmonization with respect to the regulations, I think that there's been a lot of work, a really solid work that's been done, where there are tendency to be a little bit of differences maybe in the interpretation of those regulations. And clearly the Europeans and EASA have taken a far greater approach to delegation than maybe what we've been able to do here in the United States. But I do believe that the FAA has done a very solid job of harmonizing, particularly with Europeans, around harmonization. Now, as the Chinese start to come into this world, then that's going to be another area that we've got to continue to focus on, and continuing around the entire world as we move forward.
Okay, well, I won't ask you here, but perhaps you might opine to me privately on how you see sometimes a regulatory structure being used on a competitive or anti-competitive basis, and I'd be interested in thoughts on that, but I won't ask you to do that publicly.
I would love to spend some time with you on that.
I'd love to. And to follow up on your statements, Mr. Ilkman, is one of the parts of the past testimony, since I know you're not here representing Gamma, but you are involved with them, and they're saying because, and part of this is part of this is sometimes a bureaucratic problem, but sometimes it's a resource problem in terms of expertise or actual just people to staff these issues. And they're saying that what's happening is because of the demands on the oversight in other areas and new problems that are having to be dealt with, such as unmanned aerial vehicles, that smaller businesses, manufacturers in avionics and other areas who can't afford to go to an ODA are getting into a longer and longer and longer line for certification And do you have any thoughts on that, how we can address that?
Duncan Aviation has an ODA. We have for a number
Just get a little closer to the mic.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Duncan Aviation does have an ODA, and we've had for a number of years.
Right.
It has been very successful for us as well. There is a lot of work. We had a lot of staff. In our case, what we're able to do is also hire unit members that we don't have on staff full-time. Because of the variety of the airplanes that we work on, we don't have dedicated unit members for each of the applications that we use, so we hire them as we need. So that's how some of the smaller companies go about doing it. I would say there are members on my committee of GAMA, the maintenance committee, that do not have ODAs. And I think it depends on the region, on how quickly they could be sequenced or they could not be. I would say in our region that has never been an issue to my knowledge, but so I can't comment about all the other regions. But clearly it can be a challenge in certain smaller companies who don't have or can afford to invest in the ODA.
All right. Do you think prioritization is an issue? I mean, they pretty much work, at least in my experience, in dealing with problems with certification, particularly as it relates to firefighting, has been a perennial issue in my part of the country. There doesn't seem to be a prioritization process, like, okay, fire season's coming, we really need this certified. Well, there's 15 people who applied for this, and this, which are not so time sensitive. I mean, do you think the process needs to set some levels of prioritization better? Or it sounds like your region works pretty well, but...
Yeah, it's difficult for me to answer that question since I'm not part of that process at this point.
Yeah, okay. Just from the perspective of Boeing, to me, I mean, part of the solution here is a risk-based system, which, where we're looking, not spending much time on routine things, but we're spending time on critical components. Do you think the FAA is doing a good job of that, or could they do a better job of that?
Excuse me. Obviously, I think that we're moving in the right direction. Are we moving fast enough? I think we could do a better job in some of the things that we are currently involved with. We have 1,000 people that are part of our ODA organization, and we have a tremendous amount of capability. I think it's time that we move to really risk-based approach to this. Systems engineering allow us to do the detail engineering and those kinds of things. Where we sometimes come apart is a little bit on the interpretation of some of the requirements, and we should have a vehicle of which we can deal with that. But we're working towards it. Are we working fast enough? It's about speed, it's about efficiency, and those kinds of things. And with the level of certification that we're going to have coming towards us, in addition to the amount of work that we're having with delivering 723 airplanes, we're going to be doing 4 million hours of engineering over the course of the next few years just on existing programs. And that's not to say on these new development programs. So there's a tremendous amount of work in order for us to continue to deliver airplanes that I think that we could do more of the work that maybe that the FAA is doing today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Mr. DeFazio, you asked for a UC. I didn't respond to it. A UC request to submit a pass statement to the record without objection, so ordered. And now go to Mr. Lobiondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank the chairman for elevating this issue to the full committee level because of its critical importance. And Mr. Connor and Mr. Hilkeman, thank you for being here. This certification process is critically important on our country's aviation sector, and I know you've touched on this, but for the new members, could you each elaborate on the impact of the FAA certification process that has on your company's ability to compete and to innovate? Mr. Connor?
Well, the certification process is one of the key pieces of what we do in terms of getting particularly new products to market. The 787 went through the most extensive certification and approval process in the history of aviation. Tremendous amount of work there. Where I think that we can be better equipped to compete is, again, around this delegation piece of this thing. The EASA is working more towards delegation, allowing the manufacturer to do some more of the non-risk, high-risk type of items, going towards a risk-based approach where the FAA is truly involved in the oversight of those highly critical systems, going to a systems engineering approach, maybe changing the workforce in a little ways in terms of having systems engineering as part of that is, I think, more of the critical pieces here. So we can take on some of the more standard things that are common to every one of our airplanes, and they can be focused on those new technologies where the risk-based approach can be really utilized to its fullest extent.
Yes, Mr. Hockelman.
Sure. You know, the two areas that we interface with the FAA is on the repair station and then on the design and modification system, Part 21. In both of those areas, you know, I would say our interface with the FAA has been very positive. I think on the ODA side, for what we do, with a lot of installations, they can range all the way from a complete new cockpit to a cabin management system to a Wi-Fi system to just an additional item in the cockpit. Most of those we're able to do under the ODA, almost all of those. At sometimes the FAA picks and chooses to have oversight on some of those, but I would say the majority are done through our ODA, and we approve those in the same manner that Boeing does on their authority. So in our case, I would say the ODA is working, and it allows us to innovate and install a lot of new equipment.
Mr. Connor, do you feel that in any way the FAA's certification process is hampering you with global competition that is dealing with some different standards than you may be?
Well, I think it's dealing with different, not standards, it's dealing with different interpretations at times. I think that we need to be clear. I think the FAA has done a very good job of harmonizing those requirements with the international regulatory authorities. The area where I think that we can be more effective is in terms of utilizing the delegation that's already been approved to the extent possible. We spend a lot of time and effort in some of these areas where I think that our delegation could be utilized to a greater extent, and then the utilization of the FAA resources on those more critical areas. So does it inhibit our ability? It makes things more complicated sometimes. At the very last minute when we're trying to deliver an aircraft, that can become an issue for us, becomes an issue for us with our customer, it can become an issue with us in terms of having to churn our production system a bit to make that happen. I think that this is a place where we can move to the more risk-based approach, and I think that would be in the best interest of the industry, is in the best interest of utilization of the resources that the FAA has in their arsenal there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lobiando. With that, recognize Mr. Nolan. No questions from Mr. Nolan? Ms. Kirkpatrick? It's recognized for 5 minutes.
I live in Arizona, and I spend about 10 hours a week in the air, so I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing, because I think a lot about airplane safety. But I have a really practical question. I mean, I'm very concerned about certification, but you know, oftentimes, not too frequently, but sometimes I'm on a plane and the pilot announces there's a mechanical problem, and we sit on the tarmac for a couple of hours. What kind of oversight is there over that repair at that moment when we're sitting in the plane? What kind of oversight standards is there?
Well,
do these certification standards apply to that?
Yeah, typically the mechanics and the airlines have an authority of which to go fix those kinds of issues. They're not necessarily, I mean, that's within the framework of the airlines, and I'm probably not in the best position to be able to answer that, but that's more of an airline maintenance type of approach to things. And these are things that typically come up every time. They have their own certification process, too, for their mechanics and those kinds of things.
So how many certification processes are we talking about here?
Well, it's hard for me to say.
Okay, but you acknowledge there are different certification standards for different
Well,
areas.
the airlines have theirs, and then we have ours as
Right.
a manufacturer, yes.
How long, so suppose we go to the risk-based certification process, how long does it take someone to get to that standard where they can do that?
Well, I mean, that would be something that the FAA would probably be in better position to be able to, but they have the people today that are able to do that. We have people today that are delegated, trained, approved. Like I said, 1,000 people are delegated and approved within the Boeing company's ODA organization that can can approve design, approve installation on the behalf of the FAA.
Here's my concern. We have data that shows that there's about 1,000 people shortage in the certification process. So you have 1,000 at the FAA.
At the FAA, yeah.
Right. And so what I'm trying to get to is how can we streamline, what can this committee do to streamline that hiring process? That's a lot of people. And we still have a lot of people who need jobs.
Yeah, we have ours. I think utilizing it to the fullest extent we possibly can in the right areas where there's not the highest risk areas with respect to the airplane itself, that's where we can be utilized so they don't have to use their resources unnecessarily. They can retrain or hire new people that are more systems engineering based that can provide oversight to those high risk, flight critical areas as opposed to maybe in some of the areas that we are more capable of and have more detailed capabilities around.
Thank you. Mr. Hinkleman, I appreciate that you're hiring veterans. We have very highly qualified veterans now who are back from Afghanistan and Iraq. Do you find that there could be a streamlining of the certification for veterans who may be already trained to do this kind of work but have to go through the whole recertification process?
What we find, we hire people from all walks of the services. In other words, if they were working on tanks, if they were working on aircraft, or if they were working on helicopters, they have a certain amount of mechanical skills that they've learned. And so we are able to hire them directly into our facility. And then depending on the experience that they receive and their own abilities, they're able to move up very quickly in our organization. So we don't have a lot of transition, and a lot of the bases have their own transition training back into the public sector. So they're coming directly to us. I would say half of those are referrals from existing veterans that have been in our company in the last few years. So I get to meet every individual we hire through an orientation process, and I always ask them, how did you find out about us and why did you decide to join us? And I would say 50% of those are referrals from existing individuals, and in the case of veterans, it's from other veterans. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for that. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Hanna is now recognized for 5 minutes. And also I want to apologize, Mr. Larson. You were at the top of the list, Mr. Larson. I overlooked your name. I apologize for that. Yes, exactly. With that, Mr. Hanna is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Connor, maybe you could elaborate on exactly what a risk-based approach is, because it sounds as though there's some margin there that's different than absolute perfection.
Okay. First of all, I want to just drop back. We talk about workforce training and development. It's very important that we have the right skills, not only within the FAA, but also within the Boeing company to do these types of things. Systems engineering is very critical in this approach. Risk-based is about those flight-critical pieces of the airplane, elements of the airplanes.
Excuse me, Mr. Connor, can you pull those mics closer to you? It's better the closer you get.
Okay.
We can hear you better.
All right. Thanks. I don't want to shout.
I want to hear everything you have to say.
Okay. Where we can probably spend more of our time is on the interiors, certifications, seats, lavatories, galleys, those kinds of things. We spend an awful lot of time in these areas, and this is where our customers, our airline customers, want to differentiate themselves against their competition, and that's where we can spend more of our efforts, whereby allowing us to take that 1,000.
You want more responsibility.
Well, I want more
over
responsibility
certain items.
in the right areas. This is where I want to make sure that I make very clear. We're not looking to eliminate. We are looking to make sure that we are working with the FAA on the right things, and we're taking the right approach to these things.
Can I ask you about Airbus for a minute?
Yeah.
They have a different system over there. How do you feel that do you have a competitive advantage or disadvantage, and how does the FAA play into that for your whole company?
Well, the FAA works with EASA, and then they come back and they validate the certification of which EASA has done on the Airbus aircraft. What we do know is that the Airbus utilizes delegation to a further extent than probably we do. Mm-hmm. To what extent exactly, I couldn't speak to that. I think maybe the FAA could have a better feel for that. But we do know that their delegation, they've taken advantage of a greater portion of the delegation in areas such as interiors, in areas such as the things I just spoke about.
So it's safe to say that you're somewhat of a competitive disadvantage.
Well, if we have to spend a lot of time in redoing, or if the FAA is coming back and redoing some of the things that we've already done, then I think it's just not a great utilization of either one of our resources. That's probably better. It's not nearly as efficient as it could be, and that then causes disruption within our production system. It causes disruption into the value stream of our suppliers, and it causes disruption to our customers as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Larson.
Thanks. So just to get some perspective here, visited a small manufacturer up in Anacortes in my district, and they make a variety of components for smaller airplanes, including things called vortex generators, which I'm sure Mr. Hanna knows all about, since he flies smaller airplanes. But, smallest one no longer than probably my thumbnail, and that has to get certified. It goes on the airplane. So for some perspective, except for the airplane itself on delivery, how many individual parts and components in a 737 approximately have to have a FAA stamp, metaphorical stamp?
I mean, I don't know. Every single, every one.
Every single piece.
Look, we go through a certification process of not only the production system, which includes the supply chain, but every part ultimately that's part of a design, because the FAA certifies our design, and every single part then has to be certified.
So when you talk about the existing planes as well as the future planes that you're going to be designing and building,
yeah,
each of those come with the same or a different production process?
It could, depending on what we do with technology. Yeah.
And so the process itself as well needs to be,
yes,
if it's a new process, it needs to go through a certification,
yes,
as well.
Yes, yes.
So we're not just talking about parts and components.
No.
We're talking about not what you make only,
What's
but
the production
how you make
system? When I talk about the production system, are the quality inspections appropriate? Have you followed the intent of the planning documents and the engineering intent of what we put into the design? Those are all the same things that are part of the certification process.
Yeah. So so it's not, again, it's not just the what you make, but it's the how you make process, yes, as well. So in terms of on the how you make side of the production process, how much of that is currently an ODA related, and how much?
Well, we do an awful lot of that work ourselves, and then the FAA comes in and certifies our production system, and they do audits to verify those types of things, and we do audits ourselves, and it's a constant. It's kind of the production system is constantly being evaluated and audited.
Yeah, and in terms of the FAA inspectors who come in and do the auditing, you discussed as your second point the necessity of training an FAA workforce. Do you have an estimate of what numbers of people? Do you have an estimate of how to train? What FAA ought to be training in?
Well, I think the one place I would want to emphasize is the systems engineering piece of this thing is being a very critical part to start to move towards, as opposed to detailed design type of activity. That's where we can be very helpful in that respect, because we have the detailed design capability and analysis and those kinds of things, where they can become at a higher level and be looking at it more from a systems approach to that. Systems engineering, I think, is one of the areas that will be an important piece of the workforce training for the FAA.
Yeah. And you talked about the supply chain as well, which is extensive for
Yes.
you and your main competitor.
Correct.
Throughout the country, throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
How is that managed through ODA, and are there any changes that need to take place, or is that all you don't deal with that part?
No, we deal with that part as well. We go in and we establish the production system. The FAA comes in and which includes our supply base, and they come in and validate that as well through their audit process.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Mr. Hilkeman, you mentioned that at least it's been your experience, I guess, that for the ODA that you haven't had many, I don't know how you describe it, many problems with inconsistent interpretation, perhaps, at least in your region. Is that right? Is that what I heard you say?
Implementation and use of the ODA has worked well for us in our region.
Okay. Do you have concerns, or how should we address concerns that we hear about inconsistencies region by region?
Well, the inconsistencies have been more on the repair station interpretations as you get new inspectors and additional inspectors. I think if you look at the ODA, the more responsibilities, the more things that the ODA can do, because some ODAs are very limited. The more things that the ODAs can train themselves, add staff to, and develop, in effect, you're decreasing that 1,000, requirement jobs that you talked about that the FAA would need, or you make the resources available for those small companies that was suggested is out there, or concern for the smaller companies. So I think, if we can get all the ODAs operating at the highest level possible, and additional delegation, in effect, that reduces the need for additional inspectors and creates capacity for the rest of the system.
All right, good. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Rice is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. And Mr. Connor, particularly thank you for American excellence in aviation and for employing so many thousands of people in South Carolina. I appreciate that very much. Aviation is certainly a shining light of American manufacturing, and one area in which we maintain our leadership role in the world. I'm focused very much on American competitiveness, and I've seen over and over and over again in my 2 years here in Congress how government regulation, too often in the name of protecting the public, makes us less competitive and actually does very little to protect the public. That being said, if we sacrifice safety in American aviation, then we won't be competitive in that area very long. So I'm sure you guys have a vested interest in that, and that you need to make sure that that record of safety is maintained, and you don't want to do anything to compromise that. Now, from what I understand, Mr. Connor, you're saying that the FAA is now looking at areas that don't necessarily deal with flight safety, but more things within the plane that don't deal with its flight, like the interior of the plane, the lavatories, and the
Those
kitchens.
are just examples, yes, yeah. Correct.
Do they spend a significant amount of time dealing with these things that have nothing to do with the flight of the plane?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time in these areas to certify the airplanes, particularly the airplanes that we are delivering today. Maybe not as much on the new development projects, but particularly in the areas that we're delivering today. Yes, we do spend a lot of time on that.
Now, and you have certified FAA inspectors on your payroll.
Correct. And engineers.
Have you people or airplane manufacturers gone to the FAA and said, look, maybe you should be focused on areas that deal solely with the flight safety of the plane and not with what color the interior of the seats are and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, yes, we have.
And they still want to focus on these
No, I mean,
collateral matters?
Look, I think that I want to make this clear is that we are working very closely with the FAA to move in this direction. What we'd like to do is take advantage of or utilize the level of authorization that we do have from an ODA perspective, so we can better utilize the resources that we have and better utilize the resources that the FAA has.
Have you run any estimates of the cost in money and or time to deal with these collateral issues with the FAA? Not with flight safety, but interiors and lavatories and...
Well, I mean, right for now it's more anecdotal, but I can tell you that we spend an awful lot of time. So we haven't necessarily, I don't have the data right in front of me, but it's something that we could probably compile over the course of time here. But I would just say that it's an inordinate amount of time is spent sometimes on seat certifications, on interior certifications, on lavatory, galleys, these kinds of things that I think that we have the capability to do a very good job. We're highly trained in these areas. These are things that we deal with every single day. And we have a full ongoing commitment. Our reputation as a company, as an industry, is built on safety. And I can tell you it's the top priority of every single individual within our company, and we are constantly working to improve the safety of our products, and we get that feedback every day from operations, from our customers, from our suppliers, and we work to enhance that constantly.
I don't want you to disclose any trade secrets here, but it would be safe to say with commercial aircraft being a relatively expensive item that the markup is probably pretty low on these things. The profit margin's not real high.
No, it's not. And it's getting more difficult all the time. Our competitor is extremely aggressive in the marketplace, and they are very much focused on being the #1 manufacturer in the world, and that would be Airbus.
And so
then with the advent of the Chinese, they're going to be coming as well.
And so with the ever-expanding U.S. government bureaucracy eating into that profit margin, that makes you a little less competitive in the world?
Well, I think the most important thing here...
I know I'm using terms that you wouldn't use.
Yeah, well, the most important thing is to continue to drive efficiency, speed in the areas that are appropriate without compromising safety at any single level. Sometimes I think we are duplicating efforts, and that's where we want to move away from and allow the FAA to really focus on those things that are most critical to the safety of flight of our aircraft.
Thank you very much, sir, for being here. And again, thank you, both you gentlemen, for American and excellence in American aviation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. And with that, Mr. Huffman from California is recognized if you have a question. Okay, and I just want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the committee and understand you're going to be joining us this Congress. So again, look forward to working with you. Ms. Norton. Ms. Norton's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is an important hearing. Mr. Connor, I note your pages aren't numbered like my students in my law class, but it's under delegated authority.
Yes.
You go to great lengths to commend FAA's delegated authority.
Yeah.
You say there are stringent FAA requirements. You say you're held to very high standards.
Correct.
You talk about rigorous and closely overseen ODA systems. I wonder how you reconcile this glowing report with what the DOT and IG and the GAO have said about how they have criticized. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
It seems to me it's fair to say sharply criticized. Both of these are independent overseers, sharply criticized FAA oversight of the certification program. How do you reconcile your glowing report with these?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the question. I can tell you it's a very stringent process in which we go to achieve delegated authority, both on a company-wide basis and on an individual basis, and it's constantly evaluated over and over again.
Well, let me just ask you about constantly evaluated. There's been sequestration, there have been cuts, there have been furloughs. How often are you audited?
I would have to ask for help.
Well,
on
I
that.
wish you'd, when you
We are
say-
often, I can tell you we are audited on a production system and on a design basis at least once a year. And it goes to our supply base. It goes not only to us, it goes to the supply base. It goes to all our facilities. The FAA's in terms of auditing, there quite often.
So you see no shortage of personnel had no effect upon the cuts there or the sequestration.
On the
You see none
yes.
of that reflected.
No, we were impacted. We were impacted by sequestration. We were not able to deliver airplanes on time because we were not able to get appropriate FAA inspectors to come in at certain times. They were limited in terms of their overtime capabilities. They were limited in terms of their ability to support in terms of certain critical inspection processes that come with the delivery of an airplane. So there were impacts from the standpoint of being able to deliver airplanes. Now,
I think it's fair to put it on the record because if there are deficiencies, the question is going to come forward: are the deficiencies on your part, or were the auditors or those charged with oversight not doing their job? And I think it's important to note that you have testified that sequestration and cuts have had an effect on the ability of FAA to do its audits. Could I ask you something about?
Well, the audits take place, detailed formal audits take place every 2 years, and then we do constant informal audits as the years as time.
So they're meeting the minimum requirements.
Yeah. Well, that's the requirement.
Could I ask you something about Boeing and noise, or airplanes and noise?
Noise.
We're in a region, and this is typical of the United States, large cities, quiet suburbs. There have been real complaints about noise, and we find that what happens is that airplanes get rerouted. Well, if they get rerouted, for example, from the nation's capital, they're going over suburban Virginia, so then they complain.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to improve the noise levels of aircraft today at a rate that would satisfy these issues in what is going to be a situation where everybody's going to live in an impacted environment, even those who live in the suburbs?
With each new airplane we bring to market, we are required to satisfy certain noise levels. And those noise levels get more stringent with each new airplane we introduce. And so, yes, I would say that we are complying to those strict standards.
So those are part of the standards that you have to comply with?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'll save that question for the FAA.
Yeah.
Finally, could I ask you concerning international flights, your honest view, whether you have any compunctions, any fear, any sense that you should bring to our attention about these disastrous international accidents that have happened recently on international airlines. I want to know if you believe their counterpart oversight equals ours. I, of course, refer to the Malaysia Airlines, the most recent one, and, of course, to Air Asia.
You know, I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment on those because they're still under investigation. We really don't know at this particular point in time. Once we do know, then we'll be able to make the appropriate.
But on a peer basis, in dealing with these airlines, do you have confidence in airlines on an international basis that they're being held to the same kind of standards that you regard as rigorous that you are being held to?
That if they are certified, yes, they are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time has expired. Mr. Davis is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to both the witnesses. Mr. Connor, I want to echo what my colleague, Mr. Rice, said about Boeing being an employer in his state, and thank you for what you do in the passenger side, but also on the defense side to my constituents who work just across the river in Illinois from St. Louis. Mm-hmm. Anytime you'd like to bring any South Carolina jobs over to Illinois, we'd be happy to work with Mr. Rice on a good compromise.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
Thanks. 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 Mr. Connor, in your testimony, you stressed the importance of FAA delegating authority so it can shift its focus from low-risk items to higher-level safety opportunities. Can you provide an example where the FAA still retained a low-risk item, and what reason did the FAA cite for retaining that low-risk item, and what kind of impact did it have on your certification process?
Well, I want to stress here, too, that we have worked very well with the FAA on moving towards this delegation. And I think the leadership of Administrator Huerta, his staff, I think that's gone. We're moving in the positive direction. The degree of which we move and the speed of which we move are areas where I think that this could be, that we could improve on. As I said, the areas of interior certification, whereby our customers want to be more, have more control over, how they differentiate themselves, but still staying within the requirements of the engineering design and the intent of the design and those kinds of things. We have a lot of capability in these areas. These are areas where I think that the FAA could move a little bit more towards us doing more of the delegation. Areas of galleys, areas of lavatories, areas of seats, areas of sidewalls, overall interior certification. These are things that we do all the time. And I think that there's duplication of effort, and that's where we could then utilize their resources to work on some of the more critical items. Excellent. And use our resources to work on those. Because what we have today is both working in the same direction. But I do want to emphasize that we've worked very well in moving towards this. It's now we're just getting to these points of the speed at which we move and the degree at which we move.
Well, you outline a number of steps the FAA and this committee can take when crafting our new FAA reauthorization. What's, in your view, is the most critical step?
Utilization of the ODA, and one of the critical things is getting the workforce trained in a different way, in the more of the systems engineering type approach. Now, this will take time. It's a cultural change, moving away from maybe some of the more detailed design effort, which we do, and which we are approved to do, and which we have an ODA delegation that would allow us to approve those things. But moving again towards more of that risk-based oversight, utilizing systems engineering type approach. So this will require some transition on the FAA's part from the standpoint of training and some of those other things.
Okay, I have a little bit of time left. I'm going to ask you one more question. The NTSB recommends that the FAA and manufacturers utilize outside experts when certifying new technology.
Yes.
They believe it could be the most efficient way to ensure operation safety.
Yes.
Do you use independent outside experts when certifying new technology, and can you give me an example?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I was one, we had the battery incident a couple years ago, and this is one where we complied with all the requirements that were known at the time. Everything was certified, most extensive certification ever. When we had the incidents, we drew on that outside expertise from the automobile manufacturers, from different places. I think where we move, as we move to new technologies that are maybe being utilized in other areas, this is where we as a community, FAA and ourselves, can draw on some of that industry knowledge to help us in terms of how we move forward and apply those to the aircraft.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back the balance of my time, but thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And Ms. Frankel is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Well, I can say this about most of us probably on the pat here, is that we are experienced amateurs at flying, do a lot of flying.
We all are.
Yes, and I actually feel rather safe when I fly, but I think the scariest thing for me and for probably most people is for the customer, talking about the customer, is that when you get on the plane, you feel you have completely lost control of your life. Unlike a car where if you hear a rattle or something, you can pull over. When you're in an airplane, it's like you are depending on somebody else. I mean, there's really not much you can do. You put your seatbelt on, hold somebody's hand. But so I'm not so sure I actually understand or maybe agree with if you are saying that there were certain elements of the design of the plane that should not have an inspection by an independent party. Is that what you're saying? I mean, for example, a bathroom.
No.
Okay, so how would that work?
Well, we're authorized. We have delegated people. These people are essentially the arm of the FAA. Although they're paid by us, they're within our organization, they are approved individually by the FAA. They carry the FAA authority, in essence. And we take that very, very seriously. Each individual takes that very, very seriously. And I would say, when you get on an airplane, just know that the safety of that aircraft is the #1 priority, not only for everyone in our organization, but it's the priority of the FAA and any other people involved in the building or certifying the airplane. But I can tell you that I'm not saying our people have those capabilities as well. We're just saying in those areas where we have that capability, we have that strength, that are less flight critical, that's where we could be utilizing those capabilities to a greater extent.
But there would be circumstances where an uncomfortable passenger could lead to a dangerous situation in a cabin, correct?
But that's not going to, I mean, that, sure, that happens, yes.
So getting back to, I think the focus of what you're trying to say is you are looking for safe ways to speed up getting the aircraft out into the marketplace.
More efficient ways.
More efficient ways. The problem right now, would you say, is it not enough inspectors, not enough competent inspectors, or a lack of focus of what's important?
No, I think we have enough resources. Between the FAA and ourselves, we have enough resources to make this happen. It's how we utilize those resources in the most effective way possible so we can ensure that we maintain a safe and compliant product while still being efficient enough to be able to compete in the highly competitive aerospace industry.
I still do think there is some power in and influence when you are signing the paycheck. Is there any other independent person who could?
Well, the FAA comes back in, and at any moment they could come back in and evaluate that to make sure that we are doing exactly what we said we would do. And we are required through the ODA process on the individual basis to make sure that they are. Every 2 years they come in and they audit our entire production system, which includes that.
So could you just give some more concrete examples of what you would take off the list?
Take off the list in terms of their involvement? Well, I would certainly, as I've said, the interior aspect of the airplane, these are places where we could do more of the work. Okay, these are things. Systems, how the systems interact with each other, how they interact in terms of flight, those kinds of things. When I say systems, you know, it's about engines, it's about the flight controls, it's about those are the areas where I think that the FAA, from a risk base, those are high risk or risk areas of terms of flight, that they could spend more of that energy in those areas and do them on a systems risk-based oversight basis.
Thank you. And, you know, Mr. Chair, I would just request, I don't know if there's anybody who could give us the other point of view or the view of the FAA. That would be of interest to me. But
I think they are.
Stick around for the next panel.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
And I think it's important to, sometimes I think this goes without saying, but it needs to be said. Boeing and Mr. Hilkeman, they want those planes to work.
Yeah,
they can't afford to put a plane out. I mean, that's your business.
Chairman Schuster, our entire reputation, our ability to sell, our ability to operate is built. We're a 100-year company.
Right.
And for us to maintain that reputation that we've built over the course of time is completely dependent on the ability to deliver and operate safe airplanes.
Absolutely.
We are completely That's the #1 priority of every individual within the company. And if we ever find anyone deviating from that, they are immediately dismissed.
Mr. Hilkeman, you echo those same sentiments for what you do?
100%. It's the most important thing for us. You know, our reputation is only as good as the last aircraft we delivered. So every aircraft has to go out.
Absolutely. Thank you. And next is Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd just like to thank the chairman for the opportunity to be on this committee, being involved in the construction industry, being involved in the Regional Transportation Commission for many years in my state. I feel like I'm well versed in many of the issues on this committee and appreciate that opportunity to be here.
Mr. Hardy, I think you got a bad mic. You want to scoot over?
There we go. How about that?
It's breaking up somewhere in the... Just move over one chair and try to use someone else's mic. Thanks.
Anyway, can you hear me now? Anyway, being a new member on this committee, I would like to ask a question that a little out of line here, but in the past on these reauthorization regulations that are set up, is there collaboration between the private sector and the public sector on the efficiency of this? And the reason I bring this up is in the state and local levels all over the country, because of this recession, have got together and been in the construction industry. We have worked together with those state and local entities to create a program to where we can build bridges and tunnels and dams more efficiently, cost effectively, and still maintain a high standard of safety. So is that done in this process with the FAA?
From Duncan Aviation standpoint, I guess I would look at it from GAMA, the maintenance committee. We've been in existence now for, I think, around 3 years. And I think almost at every meeting we've had an FAA representative there who can discuss issues and concerns and things that we're seeing in the industry. And so that was probably the genesis of the additional guidance on the mobile maintenance unit. So from our standpoint, it's a very positive to have that interface. Everyone that's on that committee walks away saying, we're glad we came to that last meeting. And the feedback I've received from the FAA has been in the same. So it's a great resource, and anyone who's not on the committees, they're losing out on a lot of opportunity to interface and have feedback back and forth.
Thank you. Another question I have, Mr. Connor, Mr. Hilkeman, you both have a vast amount of experience. You know your companies and industries very well. Instead of us telling you how to run your company and how we should restrict you, could you maybe elaborate a little bit on, tell us how regulations should be structured if you were in charge of the basis, and also please share with the committee the regulations that are hindering your company that pertains to your industry.
Well, I think the regulations as they stand I think it would be out of my experience to talk about what we should do with reform and such, but we have a good set of regulations. How we apply those regulations, how we manage those regulations, those are the things I think that we can spend. We as the company and working with the regulator can spend more time. I mean, there's beyond interiors. There's a number of different places where compliance is well known, well understood. We've done these things over and over again as an industry, where we could take some of that, relieve some of that burden from the FAA as well. I think this is more about taking what is there and applying it in the most efficient way, so that both the FAA and industry can work in the most efficient way possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. And let's see, no one on the Democrat side. Mr. Rouser, who's on the Democrat side, actually.
Looks can be deceiving. Mr. Connor, Mr. Hilkeman, I appreciate you all coming forward today. And by the way, it's good to be up close and personal here. I have just one quick question for you.
Check myself here.
I have one quick question for you. I come from a policy background, but also a business background as well. And anybody who's been in business understands that time is money. My question is, and we've been all around it, and I'm just wondering if there's a concrete answer. How long does it take you to manufacture a plane from start to finish under the regulatory apparatus that we have today? And then a follow-up question to that is, if we implement, or FAA is able to implement this risk-based approach that you've outlined several different times, how much does that save you on a time front? Or is it more of a efficiency in terms of lower costs, so therefore you can be competitive as well?
It's a little bit of both, actually. I think that we can move a little quicker in the development aspect of things. That's typically, developments in 4 years type from start to finish with a new airplane. On an existing airplane, that varies depending on the airplane type in terms of start to finish. But where we could be more efficient, it's just about efficient in how we bring those airplanes actually into the hands of our customers. That's really where I think the things could be much better for us.
Mr. Hilkeman, do you have any comment, follow-up?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rouser. Mr. Gibbs is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Connor, Boeing, I'm over here.
Oh.
That's all right. Commend you for it's really exciting to hear about the increase of employment and planes you're building and the orders. That's exciting. And I want to kind of follow through a little bit in Mr. Hanna's questions about your foreign competition and the regulatory structure. And I realize, we have agreements with them and the FAA, and I'm sure the airlines get involved. And then also with Mr. Heichman on your written testimony, it kind of comes together a little bit. In your written testimony, you say there is frequent and redundant surveillance activities, many of which are conducted by foreign aviation authorities, duplicate similar efforts while producing little additional value, and some of it's done by foreign authorities. So I'm trying to, I think, Mr. Connor, you said that our bureaucracy sometimes, takes longer than what it maybe takes some of your foreign competitors. And Mr. Aikman, having run the largest maintenance, repair, and overhaul business in the United States, in this regard, how levels the playing field? When you say the foreigners coming in and causing those problems, and then see where I'm going here, can you kind of expound and where our challenges are to get our efficiencies in place so Mr. Connor can be competitive selling airplanes?
Sure. To give you an idea of what we see in terms of redundancy, each week we get about 4 or 5 paperwork audits a week that are sent in to us. It's requirements for most of the charter operators to conduct that and to send that to us. But we also have customers that follow those same standards. So that's happening on a weekly basis. On a monthly basis, we are audited by the FAA at one or multiple sites of our facilities. And then on an international basis, we have 6 to 8 international entities coming in for approximately a week throughout the year. And those are the audits that we pay for, either through license fees and additional audits. Some may stay for 2 or 3 days, some may stay up to a week. But so those are happening on a bi-monthly basis, minimum.
Well, just to follow through with Mr. Connor, then, would American airline customers have the ability to go do that on foreign competition airplane manufacturers, like Mr. Eichmann just kind of prescribed?
Well, when they go to pick up an airplane, then they typically will walk the airplane. They will buy off on the airplane, saying it meets their requirements. They'll fly it, and make sure that everything is to what they expect it to be. They'll walk the interior to make sure that it's everything to the expect it to be. A lot of situations we have airline inspectors within our factories watching the airplane as it's built and improving it at different stages of the build process.
I think you also mentioned the Chinese are getting into the airplane export.
Yes. Well, they're beginning the process of and starting to manufacture. Yes.
So
they haven't delivered yet, but
they haven't delivered. But the process is being started just from a safety aspect, since the planes, theoretically would be flying over our skies.
Sure.
Well, we'll have to have the FAA, the United States government, have an agreement with them?
Yes.
It'd be similar to what you have, I assume, with the French government?
And the FAA goes and with our airplanes to be able to get certified in China or any other country, we work with their regulatory agency to get our airplanes certified as well.
Okay. So I guess, you know, since we're looking at another FAA reauthorization, obviously this is an issue that you're concerned about for the efficiency, so I assume you've probably got some more information you might want to share.
Well, I think one of the things that we want to, as part of this process, it's very important that we maintain the FAA as the gold standard in the world. And therefore, them having a presence in the international arena is very important. Supporting them, being in countries, working with the other countries, having people there, for instance, in China, some of these other places where they can create influence, where they can actually do some things, working more closely and supporting them being in different places around the world so they can make those kinds of things. That's very important as a world leader to be visible and active, and we support that fully. We believe that the FAA should be the leading regulatory agency in the world, and there are agencies around the world, EASA, and I would imagine that the Chinese would want to move in this direction too, where they want to be the leader, and they are going to push the envelope to make sure that they are. So we're, from a regulatory standpoint, we're in a competition too.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Duncan?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Connor, you mentioned that your company had a 56% increase in business over the last 5 years, and some of those years weren't the best years. And Mr. Hilkman, I was wondering if you've had a similar increase in business. And the first question I have is, what do both of you gentlemen see over the next 2 or 3 years? Do you see that business increasing even faster, or what do you see in that regard? And then I have a second question. I chaired the Aviation Subcommittee for 6 years, from January of '95 till January of 2001, and I was hearing these same complaints back then. Mr. Hilkeman mentions inconsistent interpretation and application of regulations, lack of effective communications and dispute resolutions. I'm wondering, both of you have had ODAs now. You said, Mr. Connor, you said for 6 years, I think, and Mr. Hilkeman, you said for several years. And then you had this Section 313 advisory panel that put out a report in July of 2013, a year and a half ago. Are we making some progress, big progress? I mean, what do you see on those things? Since we were hearing these same things years ago. So, those two questions from both of you.
All right. In terms of growth, our business is heavy maintenance, and it's usually done 6 to 12 years after the aircraft are manufactured. So that's the bulk of our business. So we benefit from deliveries that occurred in the last 10 to 15 years. And even before the recession, we had record levels of deliveries in our industry. So because of that, and actually in our industry, the large and ultra-large aircraft continue to be sold during the recession. And so worldwide, more outside in the U.S. than in the U.S. But because of that, our business is still projected to grow. We have recovered the volume that we lost during the recession. We probably have grown, I think the numbers, if I would look at it, from 300 million to about 500 million today since the 2009. So we've recovered the portion that we lost during that first year in the recession, and we've increased that. So that's on a positive standpoint. As far as what progress have we made, I think on the ODA side, we've made progress because we've had more authorities and we can do more things. On the repair station side, we still have, we currently have 56 auditors that audit our facilities. And when you do that, you have 56 opinions. Now, those are managed through Lincoln, through it's called a CHITO, a managing office in Lincoln. But clearly, when we've changed back to having that number of inspectors, you're going to have differences of opinion. So for about 12 years, we were in a certificate management unit where we had dedicated inspectors. We had 5 in Lincoln. We had 3 or 4 remote inspectors that were full-time with us. I think the positive thing from that is it showed us that there were a lot of things over the years prior that created inconsistencies. We were able to fix those. We do have some concern. It's too early to tell you that it's going to be better or worse, but we do have some concerns when you have the quantity of the inspectors that we have today under this new system.
All right. Mr. Connor?
Yes. Well, do I see our business growing? Yes. We've committed to higher production rates in the next few years. There's 36,000 airplanes in demand over the next 20 years. About a third of those are already in the backlogs between ourselves and our competitors. So but I do believe the next few years will determine market leadership for many years to come. So we're in a very highly competitive market as we stand today. One of the reasons why we're bringing these new airplanes to market so we can compete better. With respect to ODA, we are making progress in terms of the extent at which we utilize it. Are we moving with the speed that we would like? I think we're working very diligently to work with the FAA to make that a reality. What we would like to see happen is just continue to push forward and make it a reality and utilize what's already been approved in terms of the authorization for delegation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Young?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank Mr. Connors. You build a great aircraft.
Thank you.
I fly with him all the time, and every time we get an Airbus, I shudder. So your competitor, you can forget him.
I do too, but that's okay. For other reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And with that, we thank the panel for being here today. Appreciate your input and look forward to working with you through the next FAA reauthorization.
Okay.
We'll take a few moment recess so we can switch out the panels.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Test.
The committee will come to order, joined by our next panel. I want to welcome her. I guess everybody went to get coffee or restroom break. While we're waiting for the panel to join, I know that a few of us are going to have to leave here close to 12 o'clock. Mr. Lobiando and myself are serving armed services along with Mr. Lawrence. I mean, you're not in our meeting. We're picking subcommittees on the Republican side. You guys have already done that? Okay. So Mr. Lobiando will have to excuse ourselves. We'll have, I believe Mr. Davis is going to take over the chair at that time. Well, there's nothing wrong with you, Mr. Young. I just figured you had other things to do. You had other places to go. Have we lost our two other panel members?
The bathroom break.
That's. Thank you, Mr. DeFazio. That's right. Yeah, why don't we go ahead, here's another appearance by Mr. Dillingham, who's the Director of Civil Aviation Issues and Government Accountability. So on the guidance of Chairman Young, we'll start with Mr. Dillingham, who's again been a frequent visitor to us. So, Mr. Dillingham, why don't you go ahead and proceed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member DeFazio, members of the committee. FAA has taken some important steps to address the challenges stakeholders face in getting U.S. aviation products certified for use at home and abroad. At the same time, we found that these steps are not sufficient and many key challenges remain. Regarding domestic certification and the consistency of the regulatory interpretation. At the time we concluded our work, FAA indicated it had completed 8 of the 14 initiatives established to address the Certification Process Committee's recommendation, and 2 were on track to be completed within 3 years. I understand from Ms. Baker's testimony that FAA has now completed 10 of the initiatives. When we completed our work, of the remaining initiatives, 1 was at risk for not meeting planned milestones, and 3 initiatives would not meet planned milestones, including updating the regulation under which large and small aircraft are certified. Missing these milestones increases the risk of delays in improving the certification processes for a rapidly changing and expanding industry. Regarding regulatory consistency, FAA has drafted a plan to address the Regulatory Consistencies Committee's 6 recommendations, which are targeted at improving the consistency of how regulations are interpreted by FAA staff and the industry. While the plan is expected to be released sometime this month, it is being released over a year beyond its original target date of December 2013. Moreover, some key industry stakeholders told us that although FAA briefed them on its draft implementation plan, they were disappointed that they were not asked to participate in the development of the plan, as was suggested in the 2012 FAA Reauthorization Act. Stakeholders also expressed concern about FAA's decision to close 2 of the committee's recommendations before the plan is finalized, including the recommendation on improving the clarity of FAA's final rules. Turning to foreign approval of U.S. aviation products. The U.S. has historically been viewed as the gold standard for the approval of aviation products, with some countries accepting FAA's approval as sufficient evidence that the product is safe for use in their country. Other countries, however, do not accept FAA certification, and more often, these countries are conducting their own approval processes for U.S. products. Stakeholders told us that such practices result in U.S. companies facing uncertainty and costly delays in delivering their products to foreign markets. Additionally, these companies noted that some of FAA's internal processes, such as the prioritization of foreign approval applications, insufficient staff resources and expertise, also contributed to delays and increased cost in getting their products to foreign markets. Working within the limitations of national sovereignty and other factors, FAA has several initiatives underway aimed at alleviating current as well as heading off future challenges related to foreign approvals. GAO will continue to assist this committee by providing information analysis on the certification process challenges and support committee efforts in considering these issues as part of the 2015 FAA Reauthorization Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concludes my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Dillingham. Next, the Honorable Chris Hart, who's the acting chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. Mr. Hart, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, and members of the committee, and thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of the National Transportation Safety Board today. For many years, the NTSB has investigated accidents and incidents that have identified issues regarding the FAA certification process. Most recently, we investigated smoke and flames coming from a lithium-ion battery on board a Boeing 787 at Boston's Logan International Airport. From this investigation, we recommended to the FAA actions that will address issues that they will continue to see in the certification process, especially as new technologies are introduced at an accelerating pace. The recommendations included new technologies and the need to consult with outside experts regarding those technologies, ensuring an FAA workforce that has up-to-date training regarding the new technologies, and evaluating certification from a systems perspective, as you have already heard this morning. In the U.S. certification process, delegation of the certification has been in practice for many years and is necessary to improve efficiency of the FAA in the certification process. In its current form, Organizational Designation Authority, or ODA, usually works well. It's a risk-based approach that many DOT modal agencies have adopted to use their resources more effectively and to focus their oversight on the riskiest areas. But as the NTSB has said in many investigations, risk-based systems only work well when the regulator exercises effective oversight. In other investigations, the NTSB has recognized the need for the FAA to improve the certification process in the following areas: ensuring no single-point failure modes, accounting for wear-related failures, and including structural failures and human-machine system interaction failures in the assessment of safety-critical systems. We are pleased with the action taken by the FAA last year regarding icing based on our investigation of 2 accidents in 1994 and 1997, outlined in my full testimony, but it is unfortunate that needed changes that we identified in both incidents and accidents have taken so long to implement. Additionally, the NTSB has investigated events that illustrate shortcomings with flight standards. In the investigation of a January 2003 accident, the NTSB identified improper maintenance at a repair station where the owner had been previously employed as a chief inspector at a repair station that had its license revoked. We identified that the FAA did not have any regulations that enabled them to deny applications for Part 145 repair stations of applicants that are associated with repair stations that previously had their license revoked. And we recommended that the FAA promulgate a regulation to implement this authority. The FAA published a notice of proposed rulemaking in May of 2012, but more than 10 years after the accident, it has not yet issued a final rule on the subject. As you prepare to reauthorize the FAA, the certification process is a very important component to consider. Also, the NTSB has several other safety recommendations that could improve safety of our aerospace system, including strengthening procedural compliance for pilots, expanding the use of recorders in general aviation aircraft and enhanced recorders in commercial aircraft, and oversight of public aircraft operations. I'd be happy to talk with you further about these topics as well. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. And next, Ms. Baker, who's the Director of Aircraft Certification Services at the Federal Aviation Administration. Ms. Baker, please proceed.
Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. As the Director of FAA's Aircraft Certification Service, I'm responsible for the oversight of design, production, and continued operational safety of aircraft, engines, propellers, and articles. Overseeing the safety of the world's largest fleet of aircraft while simultaneously certifying innovative new products and technology is a challenge, but one that we recognize is critical to ensuring U.S. economic growth. As such, we continuously strive to improve the process. The globalization of aviation, advances in technology, a high velocity of change, and heightened expectations from our stakeholders are all external forces driving us to re-examine how we conduct business. Since the 1920s, the FAA has relied on delegation to safely leverage the government workforce. We apply safety management principles and use risk-based decision-making to leverage delegation in international partnerships and focus limited FAA resources. Today, we delegate 90% of certification activity. We are working to streamline the remainder. My written statement includes an update on FAA's implementation of the initiatives responsive to Section 312 of the FAA Modernization and Reform Act of 2012. During implementation, it became clear that not all of industry's concerns can be addressed through national policy changes. Therefore, today, I'd like to focus on how we are addressing certification reform at the local, national, and international level. At the local level, we are reinvigorating concepts from the Certification Process Improvement Guide. This guide was developed in collaboration with industry over 10 years ago to improve cooperation and communication. Each company worked with their local office to define operating norms, develop an issue resolution process, and identify individual certification priorities. Utilizing the same philosophy, the FAA will work with individual companies to establish short and long-term goals to help them reach their vision of full utilization of the Organization Designation Authorization, or ODA. The FAA has also created an ODA scorecard to collect qualitative and quantitative data related to safety, FAA involvement, and ODA holder compliance. On a local level, the scorecard will support constructive dialogue between the FAA management and ODA holders about compliance, timeliness, and performance improvements that may be needed. At the national level, the roll-up of the scorecard metrics will allow us to monitor the effectiveness and efficiency of all ODAs, help differentiate between national and local issues, and point to areas where policy improvements are necessary. Globally, the FAA has been the leading model for safety and efficiency around the world. Yet the aviation industry is made up of an international web of networks and complex business arrangements that are challenging our traditional regulatory model. We are working with our global partners to leverage our bilateral agreements to facilitate the needs of industry. In 2013, we formed a certification management team between the FAA, the European Aviation Safety Agency, and the Airworthiness Authorities of Canada and Brazil. This team discusses means to standardize and streamline certification of aviation products by reducing duplicative processes. I know the committee is also interested in the progress the FAA has made in response to Section 312 of the Act, which focused on the consistency and standardization of the regulatory interpretation. While the implementation plan for Section 13 was formally posted on the FAA website yesterday, we've already taken steps to implement the recommendations. In fact, we have closed 2 of the 6 initiatives in the plan with support of industry. The highest priority initiative is to develop a single master source for guidance organized by regulations. We are making progress in reviewing our existing databases to assure the information is up to date. A challenge we face is that an enterprise architecture assessment identified 21 separate FAA document repositories. Last week, I participated in a demonstration of the proof of concept for the tool that will link the documents from multiple sources. This week, it will be presented to the Associate Administrator for Aviation Safety for approval of funding to proceed to field beta testing. I was impressed with the system's capability. It will link regulatory material not only by regulation, as requested by industry, but also by concept in case the user doesn't know the regulatory citation. In conclusion, the FAA has made progress on Section 312 and 313 of the Act. We are conscious of the fact that certification reform is essential for the economic growth of the United States, and we are working continuously to improve. The FAA is tracking the progress of implementing the initiatives, the performance outcomes, and the global return on investment for the FAA and industry. The FAA will continue efforts to develop meaningful metrics that promote open, constructive dialogue, facilitate positive change, and hold industry accountable to compliance with the regulations and FAA accountable to increasing efficiency of certification. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baker. As I said, I have to excuse myself, but I wanted to ask a question before I left. Ms. Baker, in your testimony, you said you completed 14 of the streamline the FAA's aircraft certification process. Can you explain to us, does that mean it's fully implemented, or does that just mean a milestone?
The 10 that are completed have been completely finished and implemented. There are some caveats where we, in our plan, have had some follow-on criteria to ensure that it is working properly, but the actual things like the prioritization process has been fully implemented.
So 10 have been fully implemented. And then again, you talk about some of the things, how do you measure that, whether it's having a positive effect? I guess if you've only, some of them just been approved and haven't had time, but what's the process you go through to measure that to see if they're working and having the effect that we intended?
Yeah, we're continuing to work with industry to assure that we have a way to measure the effectiveness of what we've put in place. We first started with phase 1 metrics, where measurement to get it into place. Some of the things that we've had from an anecdotal standpoint was to get feedback. We had a 23-point plan to increase the ODA efficiency, and we met with industry to determine whether or not they felt that the changes that we had made were taking hold. The response that we got that was positive to neutral on what had occurred after the implementation. On the project prioritization process, we no longer have a queue, so we have 0 wait time for the project, so we measure that as a success.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to recognize Mr. DeFazio, and then excuse myself, Mr. Davis is going to take the chair. So again, I thank the witnesses for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Dillingham, you, on page 3 of your testimony, you talk about some other countries do not accept FAA certification, conduct their own approval process, which can be lengthy. You don't list them. Could you provide a list?
Yes, Mr. DeFazio, we can provide a list, but I can tell you now that we spoke to a sample of manufacturers that represented a good proportion of those who export to foreign countries, and we asked them to tell us about their experiences and which countries seem to present the greatest problems right now and what was the nature of those problems. What we were told is that it differs by country, but in terms of the top countries where they are experiencing the most problems, Europe and the issues behind the EC were related to cost, that the cost of getting our products approved, and China was a top biller, and the issue for China was a combination of culture and their processes and procedures. You would have heard earlier about, matter of fact, you were the one who said it, about requesting
detailed engineering and design criteria and coming over and observing the manufacturing process, and of course they're not going to copy it. Yeah, I got that. Right.
But we'll provide you the output from our survey of the manufacturers that we talked to.
Okay. So that leads me to Ms. Baker. I know you're somewhat constrained, but he does point to a number of things, the processes of these other nations in terms of reciprocity, and in dealing with the EU, I note that they charge for certification, and we don't. And I know there is a provision of an appropriations bill that says that we have to authorize a charge. But wouldn't it be great if you had a tool to say, well, if you charge, we're going to charge you. So when Airbus wants certified, well, you're going to pay the same charges that Boeing has to pay in Europe. Wouldn't that be reciprocal, and might that not get their attention?
I'm going to skirt that a little. I think
I mean, let's say, how far along are you then in getting them to reduce these charges voluntarily out of the goodness of their heart? You know, do you expect that to happen real soon? Yes or no?
If we're successful by June, we're trying to get an agreement with them to make significant reductions in their charges.
Maybe it's a few more tools are necessary. And what about the Chinese, where we know what they're doing? What are we doing about that? I mean, they just want to be able to manufacture these things themselves. They're charging us. They send their people over here for 2 weeks for something that should take 1 day. We're required to pay for that. Are we working on some reciprocal arrangements with the Chinese that might get their attention?
We do. I think that we meet with them at least once a year, but recently we've been meeting with them quite a bit because we're conducting a shadow program of their ARJ21 program right now.
Right.
When we are aware of where they've overstepped their bounds, we have intervened. Recently, there was a situation where they were asking for much more information on the Robinson helicopter than they should be requiring just to operate the helicopter in their country. we intervened. We told them we did not feel that it was appropriate and in the spirit of our bilateral relationship, and they changed their process. And so we will then
good for you, and I hope you do a lot more of that. We have the past testimony, which unfortunately wasn't available to be read or given here, but they're pointing to the fact that a lot of times inspectors only show up at an ODA once every couple of years. That you don't have enough staff to really provide robust monitoring. I mean, do you feel comfortable about your capabilities? Are you using sort of targeting? I know that you try and target people who you think are problematic and put more scrutiny on them, but it seems to me there just aren't enough inspectors.
We use a systems approach to oversight, which I think is shown to be very, very successful in the manufacturing of aircraft. We've done that for many, many years. Rely on a system, and then our people will intervene at do spot checks. And if they find problems, then they will dig deeper and take the necessary action, whether it was a fine or if it was just a corrective action to change the procedures such they align with what the manufacturer is actually doing. We're evolving to that with engineering. As Ray testified, they have a lot of engineers. They're very competent at what they do. We just need to ensure that they are very versed in the compliance with the regulations.
Okay. And just one other quick question. When you give an ODA to a large organization, what is to prevent, in terms of your monitoring, what protections legally do we provide to the members of their ODA? Do you think the firewalls are adequate? Are there special protections that are afforded? I know we've got the hotline, but that's generally for operational things more than these sorts of things. Do you think there are enough tools out there to avoid undue influence by companies that are trying to meet deadlines for new technology, for instance?
Well, first you have to start with the premise that everyone is aiming for a safe product. Once you pass that, then you look at the individuals within the company. If they feel unduly pressured, they can come directly to the FAA and ask that we retain an item and intervene. We also require...
Do they get protection at that point? Some whistleblower or something? Yeah, I would be right with you, Don.
He could if he
Don, actually, the custom is that and I was very good before, that the ranking member gets a little more time, but, well, that's true. Yep.
He could if he went through the program for a whistleblower. When they come talk to us, it's usually not at that level. It isn't something, it's either just a misunderstanding or something that we can work out. The other thing I wanted to note is in order to be an ODA, you have to assure that there's separation in the company and the person who's in charge of the ODA has a high enough ranking within the company that they aren't unduly influenced by.
We'll cut off at that point since the gentleman from Alaska has something urgent to ask.
Okay.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Alaska is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Baker, Section 313, from your perspective, what is the status of implementing that objective?
Well, like I said, we've closed out two items. One was what they were envisioning would be a regulatory oversight body that was 24/7 that you could go to, kind of like an ops center. We decided to replace that with the Regulatory Consistency Communications Board, which then would vet the issues. So that one was set aside. That was going to be the 24/7 kind of ops center. And then we also have put forward means to train our employees.
When is the final time going to be?
It is in process. So there are a number of things. Let me go back to what the main priority is that big database in the sky that I talked about in my oral testimony. We have that proof of concept, but we have to do the beta testing, and then it'll take probably another couple years before it would be implemented. And that is really the long
I'm going to make a
suggestion.
suggestion. Just keep us informed. I don't like dragging feet. You understand? Okay. Second thing is your AFS and your AIR. Are they working together to guide the manufacturers as well as the operators, or are they separated and don't talk to one another?
We work very closely together. My office is right next to the Director of Flight Standards, and in the field they work very cooperatively together. We have a group called the Aircraft Evaluation Group that is almost a part of my organization, providing the liaison between the two organizations.
Okay, that's important because, you know, I've watched agencies over my career here as long as you were before you were born, where they grow and they grow and they grow and they don't talk to one another. And that hurts the operator as well as the manufacturer of our aircraft, and our ultimate goal is safety, not the building of an agency. So I'm hoping that you work together. Mr. Hart, of the investigations of what you do, what was the percentage of pilot error versus aircraft error?
Thank you for the question. What we generally see is system error, where it's good people trying to do the right thing in difficult circumstances and then make mistakes. And so it's actually, it's very difficult to say pilot error versus system error because it's a total system error involving the pilot and the airplane.
Okay. Now, I don't know which one, how many new regulations have the FAA passed in 2014?
I don't know off the top of
Would
my
you
head.
guys
We can take
find
an
out
action to
for
get
us?
back to you.
And the reason I ask that, again, regulation for regulation's sake doesn't accomplish the safety which we're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
I hear a lot of times you're short on money, but I see a lot of FAA activity that has nothing to do with safety. It has nothing to do with it, like moving a fence on a golf course. Lots of money spent. No reason for it. Putting fences in airports, there's nobody around, lots of money. Lots of little things within the FAA itself that takes away, I think, your ultimate goals is safety, not all this other stuff. And you grow and you grow and you forget what your ultimate goal is. But overall, I haven't had that too many complaints yet. Mostly are minor from what we call civil aviation, and again, an over-enthusiastic inspector who hasn't been trained to be inspector. So we'll look at that. It's not your problem. We're just pursuing that. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Larson, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Hart, Chairman Hart. What concerns does NTSB, what concerns has the NTSB identified with FAA's certification efforts regarding new and novel technology, and what recommendations has the board made to FAA regarding the certification of new and novel technology?
Thank you for the question. We've been looking at certification accidents for more than 20 years. The latest one that I mentioned in my oral testimony regarding the Boeing 787 battery had a wrinkle of being a new technology accident, and I suspect we're going to see more of that as new technologies come in at an accelerating pace. The key to the process with new technologies is the quality of the process. It's not how much is it, but it's how good is it. And that's why we made recommendations regarding ensuring that the broadest possible base of resource is consulted. In this case, looking at, for the lithium-ion battery, since we knew the auto manufacturers had been doing it and had experiences with it, including some bad experiences, talk to them. We knew that the Defense Department had been putting lithium-ion batteries in lots of their equipment. Good situations, bad situations, talk to them. The Department of Energy had a lot to inform the process, but they weren't consulted in advance. So we're looking at how to get the broadest base of expertise regarding these new technologies. We're looking to make sure that the FAA workforce is properly trained to stay up to speed with the development of the new technologies, because otherwise they may not know that the sources that they're looking at aren't as broad as they could be. And then last but not least, looking with a systems perspective at the introduction of the new technologies.
Ms. Baker, is the FAA using outside experts to the extent that the NTSB is suggesting, or how would you characterize what the FAA is doing relative to those recommendations?
The FAA has extensive use of outside experts. We go to RTCA, ASTM, SAE, we've used Volpe, we've used MITRE, we've used a number of outside venues to get the expertise. I think what Chris was highlighting is that one of the things that we all need to be cognizant of is that sometimes the knowledge is outside of the aviation sector, so we really need to reach broader, and that will be something that we will take into consideration as we move forward.
All right. Can you as well, Ms. Baker, discuss the accelerated use of ODAs and whether or not it's creating oversight challenges with inspectors' workload increasing beyond headcount? And what assurance can you give the committee that the FAA will be able to run the ODA program while maintaining safety?
Yes, I talked a little bit about the ODA scorecard in my testimony. Again, we're trying to look at what is going on nationally with all the ODAs, but then look at what's happening locally. We'll not only track measures for our effectiveness in our oversight, but their effectiveness and compliance with the regulations. So we're going to be building on that. That'll give me confidence that we can move further and further to a systems approach. In Section 312, you probably know that we already have looked into expanding to delegate noise, emissions, and the instructions for continued airworthiness. So I think there's many areas where we can continue to expand very safely.
Expanding, but how can you ensure then appropriate FAA oversight? We talked in the previous panel how the Boeing and many other companies, frankly, want to use ODA as fully as possible, but still need the FAA sort of behind that in order to do auditing, do oversight, and so on.
Each ODA is required to put together a manual, and we audit to the manual every 2 years, and then we do spot checks along the way to see if they are truly doing the job as we would if we were in their shoes. I think that it's been effective, and we'll continue to monitor that. We'll be watching the results from our inspections of the ODAs and to determine whether or not we're finding an increased number of noncompliances to the regulations versus noncompliances to just following their manual. I think that will help keep a very good level of oversight.
Okay. Dr. Dillingham, not that the FAA doesn't have enough to do, and we're not asking, not that we're asking them if they have enough to do, but in looking at the international certification side, as you did, do you think the FAA needs to make its international certification activities a higher priority if we're going to address these international challenges that you describe in your testimony? Where do those fit?
Thank you, Mr. Larson, for the question. I would hesitate to suggest what FAA's priorities would be, but if you look at what's going on with international, the industry representatives that we talked to indicated that from an internal perspective, leave aside what happens once the application goes overseas, is that they think that FAA does not make this a high enough priority, that including the issue of getting full use of the ODA, the ODA provision. I think from what we learned, what FAA is doing now with regard to working to make the bilaterals more efficient and more effective and working to get the concept of mutually acceptable applications from our biggest partners, I think if that plays out, then the priority issue will be less of an issue going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one final note, Mr. Chairman. Not that I'm pitching for a CODEL to the Paris Air Show, which, by the way, you don't spend any time in Paris when you're at the Paris Air Show. Just one walk around the pavilions at the Paris Air Show would let you know just how global the industry, aviation industry is, and how important this issue of FAA certification in the international market is as well. On the other hand, if we want to take us to the Paris Air Show, that's fine too.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Hart, Mrs. Baker, I have Griffiths Air Force Base, the former Griffiths Air Force Base in my district, and as you know, it's one of the 6 sites selected for UAS tests, and it is becoming a little obvious that the FAA really hasn't done the rulemaking to allow them to move forward in the way that people anticipated, because the questions that they need to answer really haven't even been asked yet. If that's fair, and that's a question. Given your experience with the FAA certification process and all these challenges, how do you plan on doing that, assuming it hasn't been done? I don't think it has. how do we take advantage of these test sites? And what are you going to do? There's an estimated 500,000 of these devices in the country. How are you going to manage all that, knowing that other countries are already using them? Some of them, Japan, for example, 20 years. And it is a tremendous opportunity for this country for all the reasons that, I don't need to go into. And you're already busy. And these sites are, for lack of a better word, they have the potential to languor. And yet we've got a lot invested in them. I guess the question is, what's going on? What can we anticipate? And how are you going to take advantage of Griffiths and help it grow?
There's a lot going on. It's a very high priority of the administrator to move out on UAS and to do it right. There's the activities with the rule on small UAS. Our Aircraft Certification Office in LA actually has certified 2 UAS on a restricted category type certificate to operate in the Arctic. We've also been working with the test centers so that they could get designees to issue airworthiness certificates so that that could facilitate them to do more work on our behalf and make them more self-sufficient. So again, I think that there's quite a bit going on. One of the other things that we're doing in our organization is we've put together an advisory circular that would identify the level of rigor that should be applied to the size and complexity of the UAS, because as you know, some could fit in your hand and others could be as large as a 747. So we're trying to establish how you would handle all of those, but it's an interaction with our organization, AVS, the Aviation Safety Organizations, which is the inspectors and flight standards, and our engineers, but also with air traffic to ensure that they will blend into the national airspace safely.
But it doesn't feel like the FAA is up to the challenge right now, that they're behind. Do you believe that? I mean, is that fair?
I don't think we would say we're behind. We're working very carefully to introduce them into our national airspace. Some of the countries that have utilized them have different situations or different environments that they're working in. They either have more open space or they have less general aviation population that's working in their airspace.
You don't think Iowa has a lot of open space?
They do.
I mean, you don't think where I live, they're taking advantage of these other countries to monitor vineyards, which we have, monitor animals. It doesn't, and these things are very controllable. I just wonder if there isn't a way to expedite the use of these at certain elevations. And I'm familiar with the Supreme Court ruling, but my time's come to an end here. But yes, sir.
Mr. Hanna, we have a study underway looking at what it takes to get UAS into the national airspace for this committee, and we have testified in the past that instead of the rule coming out when it was scheduled, the rule is going to be as much as 2 years late coming out. So what we have suggested is that there needs to be actions taken in the interim, and some of those actions relate to the test sites, meaning get a greater use out of the test sites. For example, giving them greater authority to allow testing and evaluation at the test site. Look at ways in which things can be done now on an interim basis, like Section 333 of the regulation. Also, to take some lessons learned from other countries, particularly Canada, our northern neighbor, and talk about what you've heard several times this morning, sort of a risk management approach to the integration of UAS. So there are things that can be done, and we think that FAA is beginning to move in that direction because there is such, almost a dam of industry and industry activities that are waiting.
There's a huge demand, yeah. And Griffiths Air Force Base is waiting, you know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My time's expired.
Gentlelady from the District of Columbia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Baker, I'm about to have a town meeting in the District of Columbia because of complaints about noise over residential neighborhoods. Now, I asked Mr. Boeing asked Mr. Connor of Boeing whether or not noise was a part of the process. I think you yourself have testified that it is now part of the process. Now, what we find that FAA did when there were complaints in the past about flying over areas, residential areas in this case in Virginia, was simply to fly over areas in the District of Columbia. As a part of the next-gen process, I was concerned. You have next-gen, you're supposed to have quieter aircraft, and of course, Mr. Connor testified they were quieter. We have asked for them to be flown over the river. We're wondering whether when you get complaints about noise, why are we getting complaints about noise with all the new technology? And two, why would the FAA simply go from one area to another area to relieve those complaints? Do you have a system for relieving those complaints, such as, for example, our suggestion in the nation's capital that you fly over the river where no one lives?
Yeah, the actual routing of the aircraft is a different part of the organization that I'm not familiar with, but the noise of the aircraft, the actual noise levels are set by the EPA, and we work with companies like Boeing to make improvements.
Well, certification is part. I mean, noise is part of certification.
Yeah,
do you believe that, considering next gen is already in effect to some extent, that the noise levels are consistent with increasingly flying over inhabited neighborhoods?
Yes, the noise levels are set by the EPA, so what we would do is to assure that we can work with the manufacturers to ensure that the aircraft themselves are meeting the levels.
So you say the EPA has told you that the noise levels are acceptable and that I should be talking to the EPA?
They set the noise regulations, and we're delegated to find on their behalf.
So here we have delegation on top of delegation. Yep. Let me ask a question that was never fully answered. It is very interesting and in some ways troubling to hear Mr. O'Connor testify. I think he raised this on his own accord, that FAA should not lose its own gold standard role. There was no question that he feared that was happening. I then asked him whether or not sequester and cuts had any effect. He didn't say they were the cause of the loss of the standard, but he testified that those cuts had hurt, and he gave some specific ways in which they had hurt. Now, leave aside China. This is my question. Why is the United States losing what had been a gold standard? What happened here? We're fine with you. What is the source of this loss of that lead role? Since there's no question, if you leave aside China, even the Europeans are second-guessing our role.
Yeah,
I mean, I asked that of all three of you.
Ms. Norton, you know, we've heard that metric over the last couple of years about the U.S. being the gold standard, and in fact the U.S. losing its position of the gold standard. I think that metric is more of a sort of an explanation that the world of aviation is changing. The manufacturers that we talked to had a mixed opinion about whether the U.S. was the gold standard or EASA was the gold standard or whatever. But what they were saying is, in the past, if the U.S. said okay, then it was okay. That was the gold standard, because if the U.S. approved it, it meant it was
so Dr. Dillingham,
ready to go.
Apparently it's not okay today.
Well, there are some contributing factors to that. No one is saying that the U.S. standard of quality has changed, but what we see is a GAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, telling nation states that you must establish your own certification processes and apply those as you see fit and charge what you see fit. So instead of what it used to be that it could just go through, they're going through another process.
So you don't think it casts any doubt on our standards here? It's just that everybody wants to do it his own and wants to repeat what's already been done.
Exactly. If in other countries, those organizations have to pay for themselves, so automatically they're going to charge us. And no one is saying that, you know, our quality is any less. The world is just spinning with more civil aviation authorities.
Well, could I ask you this? In terms of the training, Ms. Baker, of your own engineers, we understand there's a shortage. I don't know what it takes to be an engineer, if you have to be an engineer to be a certified engineer, but there are complaints of inadequate training, even from your own personnel. What are the difficulties you're encountering in certification of engineers, so that you can feel confident that, in fact, the inspections should be recognized everywhere?
When the engineers are hired by the FAA, they already come to us with an engineering degree, and most of the time with a lot of experience coming from a manufacturer of an aviation product. What Ray Connor...
Do you do your own training?
We do our own training. And when there's new technology, we'll send them out to training that is outside of FAA, where there is the expertise for us to gain that from the absolute threshold experienced people. What Boeing was talking about was systems engineering. So we are currently hiring people with a lot of expertise in fields like structures and avionics. What we're moving towards is a systems engineer, someone who can look at the entire system and judge where they should be making the interventions and how they can improve the system. And that's more of a process type of thing versus a specialty engineering.
Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Dillingham, for being back with us. It's good to see you again. I want to start with you to follow up. I know a lot has been discussed with regards to the ODA program. And it's my understanding that one of the biggest problems that we have is really with FAA engineers and specialists getting involved in the certification process. And essentially getting involved when the ODA has already authorized or conducted their review and duplicating efforts. And so, in other words, the ODA is doing their job, and yet the FAA is retaining some of that work. Is that correct?
When we talk to manufacturers in preparation for this hearing, that was one of their concerns about the ODA.
So that's a reoccurring, it's not just one stakeholder, it was multiple stakeholders that said that?
Yes, multiple stakeholders said that. And we think part of the explanation is that when you go to an ODA and you start to assign those kind of inspection responsibilities outside of the FAA, we're talking about a significant cultural change from the way the agency has been doing business for eons, and it takes time for that to be in place. And I think the recent...
So would you suggest more training on the FAA so they can understand the role of the ODA then? Because if it's a cultural change and you're saying that they've got boundary lines that they're crossing over, how do we make sure that that happens in a very fast and effective manner so we don't lose out to competition from overseas?
I think with as much speed as possible, as part of the 312, 313 recommendations, FAA has worked the ODA process and issued new regulations and guidance for how they're supposed to operate and their training and their oversight. So I think we're at the point now that change is possible and change in a relatively speedy time.
So you've issued the regulations. So is the training actually happening or not? And because it's one thing to write a regulation, it's another to implement it.
That's a good question. I'm going to ask Director Baker to take that on.
Thank you, Gerald. Yes, it is happening. We have an understanding by all of the engineers, if they are to retain, they need to document why it is that they are retaining. The order that was updated such that there's categories so that they would identify where they're retaining based on those categories. Again, talked about the scorecard that we were developing. We just recently got some information back on some major ODA holders, and we found that it is amazing. There is a lot that is being delegated. In one particular case, 85% of the work didn't even require a notification letter to the FAA. Of that, 15% required the notification letter, and only 5% of that was retained. But what's happening is we keep getting in the critical path to delivery of the aircraft. So
critical path means delays in certifications, delays in the process, and losing money.
It does. So that's why we take what they've identified as where they've retained and why they've retained it, and we will start to delve deeper in at the local level.
So if I were to ask the stakeholders to give you a grade on your implementation, A through F, what would the stakeholders give the FAA in terms of a grade?
Overall, we'd probably get a C, but there are people who would grade as F, and there were people that would grade as A. There are some organizations that are smaller and having quite a bit of success at getting autonomy as they would like, and there's others that are still struggling.
All right, so how do we move it from a C overall and an F in some cases to an A or a B? Because it really is not about a grade, it's about competitiveness, it's about profit, it's about keeping market share. And really, when you look at the certification process, somebody's going to do it. It's either us or we're going to lose out to other competition. So how do we move that during this reauthorization? How do we address that effectively?
Again, I don't know that it's a national solution. I really think that you've got to get down into the documentation that the employees are supposed to make when they retain something. What we found when we just did this recent survey was that there were some areas that were instructions for continued airworthiness. We've got that taken care of, so now the company just needs to ask for that authority. Noise, it's in a beta test. That will start to reduce the work that we will be involved in. Emissions, we can do that now. They just need to ask for that authority. There are other areas that were rules that were put in recently, and we were retaining them as the company gained experience. But now it's showing up as something that can be done nationally to reduce our involvement, and then we'll start to pull away where we can.
Well, as we go through this process, my time has expired, but as we go through this process, this is something that we will be looking at very acutely and very keenly. And so as you look at it, we look for specific recommendations on how we can address that. And I thank the chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman, my colleague from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. One of the biggest issues that I've been focused on during my time in this committee is streamlining the FAA's certification process to make sure that manufacturers can move innovative, safety-enhancing ideas from the design table to the assembly line into the cockpit without months of delay and unnecessary costs, which unfortunately has been happening all too often. First question I wanted to ask Ms. Baker. I was the lead Democratic co-sponsor of the Small Airplane Revitalization Act. I was pleased that Congress recognized and responded to the challenges posed by the certification process. Many of us on this committee and many at DOT and FAA view the rewrite of Part 23 rules as vital to safety innovation. So I want to ask, what steps have you taken to move this rule forward, and where is the rulemaking being vetted today? Has it been received by DOT and OMB?
Yes, the Part 23 rule is very important to us also. We've done a number of things to push the rule through as quickly as we possibly can. We have dedicated technical team working on it. We have a headquarters attorney assigned solely to this particular rule. We meet weekly to look at the schedule for all of the rules, but we meet monthly to assure that there aren't any roadblocks to move the Part 23 rule making forward. We are still working on it in our organization.
Okay, so it hasn't been received by DOT and the OMB yet. Can you assure this committee that the NPRM for Part 23 small airplane rule will be published by the summer?
The official schedule has not yet been published. We have, again, worked as hard as we can to move it as quickly as possible. And we would be happy to keep you updated on the progress of the rule if you would like.
All right, well, I definitely would like you to do that, and it's important that we move this forward as quickly as possible. I want to follow up on Part 23 with Mr. Hart. In your written testimony, you referenced general aviation safety and specifically loss of control mitigation as one of the items on your most wanted safety list. The data that government and industry have used to develop recommendations show that loss of control accounts for a significant portion of fatal accidents in general aviation. As I mentioned in the last question, the 113th Congress passed legislation that will enable safety-enhancing features to be accelerated for Part 23 category aircraft in order to address issues like loss of control accidents. How can efforts like this legislation help to achieve improvement in aviation safety?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Lipinski. We are troubled that more than 40% of the general aviation accidents are related in one form or another to loss of control, and most of those are related to aerodynamic stalls. So in addition to training, which is a continual problem, we're looking at equipping general aviation airplanes more extensively with angle of attack indicators so that the pilot will have a more direct awareness of the angle of attack. The pilot already has indirect indication of the angle of attack, but we're looking for more direct and more immediate awareness of the angle of attack to help avoid aerodynamic stall.
Are there any, anything you can say what more needs to be done on this issue? I know the angle of attack indicator is very significant. Anything else you wanted to mention that's important here?
The biggest complaint we hear generally from the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association is that the angle of attack indicators are too expensive, and as usual, that goes back to a certification issue.
So what are your thoughts on FAA's current policies and regulations on retrofitting of new equipment onto existing GA aircraft?
That's hard to generalize because in some cases retrofitting is realistic, in some cases it's not, so it's hard to make a general statement. I could give you an answer if you had a more specific question regarding a specific retrofit type. For example, retrofit of shoulder belts is very difficult in some airplanes. Retrofit of angle of attack indicator is another story altogether, so it'd be very difficult to generalize about all retrofitting.
Okay. With that, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. I see we have nobody else to ask questions besides me. So I appreciate all three witnesses being here today, and I reserved my questions till the end for my colleagues to be able to leave me here alone with you and not hear all your responses. I will gladly then tell them all exactly what you said. First off, let me start with Director Dillingham. In your testimony, you indicate that the jury's still out as to whether the FAA is successfully carrying out implementation plans for certification. Can you give me, in your opinion, the best way the FAA could avoid the mistakes of the past when it comes to implementing these plans?
Yes, sir. One of the problems that GAO has is we have been asked by this committee to look at a number of different instances where the implementation of initiatives or recommendations has been at the center of it, the implementation by FAA. And what we found is the definition of implemented and completed sort of varies all over the place, from we just started to we've got a plan to we've actually done some things. So our answer to that is, as part of congressional oversight, is to make sure that there are some metrics by which the agency can be held accountable. Metrics that include sort of a baseline metrics. Where do we start? An interim metric. Where are we now when the Congress asks again? And in the end, an outcome metric. What did we actually achieve related to what the objective of the initiative was? So we're very much into performance metrics and accountability in order so that we can get some consistency and the Congress can know what it actually means when FAA says we've implemented 22 out of 30 or we've implemented 10 out of 14. It's hard for us to tell at this point without really digging.
Welcome to our world. So, in your opinion, basically, we should hold the FAA accountable to these metrics and these performance measures and ask more specific reasons why these performance measures are not being followed.
Exactly. And what do they mean? I mean, it's okay to use the concept of implemented and completed, but what do they actually mean? What's the sort of where's the beef kind of answer?
So what you're saying is the FAA is not clear?
It varies in terms of when you ask the status of something. It varies as to what the term means.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very, very much. And thanks for bearing with me, too. Chairman Hart, your testimony before us today highlights accidents and incidents where the agency has used its investigative authority to actually promote safety objectives. Can you elaborate on what the purview of the NTSB is today? And given the safety advances that have been made in aviation as well as other modes, how has the agency evolved since its inception?
Thank you for the question. I know I look old, but I'm not old enough to have been around since its inception, but I'll do my best on answering that nonetheless. We recognize that there is a new environment today, and we need to respond to that new reality. And the new environment is new mostly because of huge IT advances. And so that's going to change the way that all of us do business, and we're looking to respond to that new reality. In the old days, we used to have an accident. We'd go out and do our exhaustive investigation, identify all the links in the chain, and come out with a report in 18 to 24 months. And the report was very useful to management because they would say, gee, I didn't know that happened in my airline every day. And it was very useful to the FAA, who would say, gee, I didn't know that happened in that airline every day. The worker bees, of course, knew about it because they did it every day. Fast forward 20 years. Today we put out that same report by the time it hits the street in 18 to 24 months because of the amazing advances that the industry has, through collaboration between government and industry, has made in collecting and analyzing data. Now, by the time our report hits the street, there's a good chance they already know about the problems and they're already fixing those problems. So what's the value that we bring to that table? And that's one of my challenges is to make sure that we position ourselves strategically to add value to that equation, because the industry has done very well, but there's always room for improvement. And our challenge is, how do we play a strategic role in that improvement?
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Baker, my district's a very rural district in central Illinois. It's a district that includes many acres of agricultural land and large real estate tracts. And we've seen that unmanned aerial vehicles are easily utilized to help not only on the production side of the agricultural sector, but also on the real estate side, to ensure that properties can be shown effectively. Since they're very large, it's very difficult for an individual to go walk the entire acreage of some of the tracts of land. So I'm concerned about what I think is the FAA's somewhat slow activity in the rulemaking process. There's obviously a growing demand. All you had to do was hear the stories from the Christmas season about UAVs and how they were popular gifts. I didn't get one, so I hope maybe you did. But what's the status of the FAA's efforts to put a risk-based certification system in place for UASs?
There's, again, various activities that are ongoing. If we're looking for an actual certification of it, I think we've got a good AC, and we've already shown that we could certify them in restricted category, and would like to continue on in that vein. But we're also issuing the exemptions, as Gerald mentioned, the Section 333 of the last reauthorization, to allow people to start to use these in areas where they can mitigate the possible damage to people and property. So I think that we have ways to accommodate many of the things that you're talking about now. And we'll move on to make sure that we provide more and more opportunities in the future.
Well, you've granted 333 exemptions so far?
No, the Section 333 of the last reauthorization bill.
Okay, you've granted 13 in Section 333. You granted 13 exemptions so far, right?
I'm not, you might have a better number than I, but we knew we weren't doing a very good job at getting them out the door. And so just last week, we pulled a group together and assured that they had everybody that needs to be involved in establishing the mitigations that are necessary to assure that we can do this safely, and put them in one room so that we can get these out as quickly as possible. So they're building templates. What had happened before was that there was offices that were remote from each other, and just the sheer need to send emails and stuff back and forth was causing delays. And so, we got everybody in one room, the attorneys, the engineers, the inspectors, everybody at one place so that we could churn up the volume. So I would hope that in a week or two, you'll see a lot more coming out of our doors. We have a 120-day metric that we want to assure that we beat by quite a bit. To do that, we have this group of people that are solely focused on just issuing those exemptions.
I mean, I hope they're still not locked in the room right now.
Almost. We said we bring them in pizza.
I mean, we have 13 that have been granted. How many do you estimate have been requested? Exemptions have been requested?
I don't know what the count is now, but we're anticipating hundreds.
In the hundreds? Okay. And Canada has granted thousands of exemptions. And maybe we just have some concerns over. We look to UAVs as part of our flying, part of our aviation sector for years to come, and there's got to be a way for us to be much more receptive to the newness and much more receptive to ensuring that they don't provide any opportunity for incursions in and around our airports. It's just simple rulemaking and simple procedures. We ought not to, in my opinion, look to the future with exemptions and more so look at how do we implement them into our existing system. I would urge the FAA to do that. And as you know, as you come in front of this committee often, I'll probably be asking you more. Are there any performance measures? You mentioned 120 days for the group now that you've gotten together, locked in the room. And you expect that to actually be done before 120 days for all of the hundreds of applications?
We have a metric for all exemptions to get them out within 120 days. That's regardless of whether it's on UAS or other things. So what we're trying to do is to reduce the amount of time that it takes to get the UAS exemptions out because it's sheer volume. So again, if we can get templates, people can see what others are granted and make theirs as similar to the request as one that was already granted, that'll expedite our ability to get them out.
Okay. Well, I look forward to working with you, and just as you offered to keep my colleague, Mr. Lipinski, up to date on Part 23, I would actually ask that you also send that to my office, too.
Okay.
All right. And thank you very much for your testimony. If there are no further questions, although I am still always haunted by former Chairman Young looking at all of us up here from our view. If there are no further questions, I thank the witnesses for their testimony and the members who are not here for their participation. I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing, and unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. The committee stands adjourned. Sorry, I misread that.
Oh, no worries. It was my fault.
I was actually, no, I looked at 333. I'm like, shit, they've done